Welcome to the Lucy demo. The Lucy Virtual Terminal is much like a physical terminal that sits on the counter or desktop in the manner that you're able to process transactions. However, since it is internet-based, it will require you to enter in login credentials. The Lucy Virtual Terminal is much like a Facebook or a LinkedIn, giving you the accessibility to access it from any Wi-Fi or internet connection. So in order to access Lucy, I'll go ahead and enter in my login credentials. After I've entered in my username and password, it will bring me to the Lucy home page. Whenever it's time to process a transaction, you'll see that there are folders on the left-hand side of the screen. This is how we navigate through Lucy. So in order to process a transaction, I'll go to the very first folder, Virtual Terminals. Once I make the selection, the folder will expand. In order to process a transaction, you want to make the selection based upon the transaction type. For demo purposes, all of the transactions today will be credit. When I click credit, the credit card sales screen appears. Now for the first transaction, we will swipe the card just as we would within a physical terminal. And we're able to do this through the USB card reader. You may have seen something like this in other establishments where this portion of the card reader is either attached or mounted to the side or on top of the monitor. And then this gets plugged into any USB port within the computer. So I will go ahead and swipe my first transaction. Once the transaction is swiped, you'll see that all of the card information will automatically populate. You have the full credit card number. Lucy will validate the card type, confirming this is a Discover. The expiration date will appear, as well as the card holder's name. The only thing that's left for you to enter would be the transaction amount and the customer ID. Now the customer ID would be any record-keeping method that you utilize within the business for the customer or the card holder. In this instance, for today, we will be a doctor's office. So our customer ID will be a patient number. I scroll to the bottom of the page and click Process. And the next page that appears will be the receipt page. Now anything on the receipt page would be anything that was provided at the time of the transaction. You see we have the customer ID, we have the subtotal. For security purposes, Lucy will only provide the last 4 digits of the card number as well as gray out the expiration date. We have the card holder's name. We see the entry method was swiped and the result is approved. When it's time to print the receipt, we'll simply click where it says Print Receipt, and Lucy will print to any network printer in the office, therefore giving you the capability to print as many copies as you need. We always suggest, however, that you print at least 2 copies. The first copy would be to obtain the cardholder's signature and retain for your records, and the other copy would be to give to the cardholder for their records. Now again, whenever you're ready to process a transaction, you would always go back to the Virtual Terminal folder and click Credit, or from the receipt page, you can click where it says click here to process another transaction, and it will bring you back to the credit card sales screen. And that was a swipe transaction. Now, what do we do in the instance where we need to manually enter a transaction? A manually entered or keyed transaction happens when the magnetic stripe on the back of the card isn't working, or if you have a phone-in or a mail-in payment that will require you to enter in the card number. So I'm going to do so. And one thing you'll notice, just as when we're swiping the transaction, Lucy will still validate the card type, confirming in this instance the card is an American Express. We'll enter in the expiration date as well as the transaction amount. We still want to enter in the customer ID and the cardholder's name exactly as it appears on the card. Now, the billing address that's associated with the card is very important to be entered when processing manually entered transactions. And the reason for that is a manually entered transaction, the processing banks views those transactions as a higher potential for fraud and for risk because most fraudulent transactions that have a stolen credit card are only entering the card number and the expiration date. So in an effort to, one, alert the processing bank that this is not a fraudulent transaction, you want to be certain to enter in the billing address. What this also does is ensure that this transaction processes at the lower swiped rate. So for the street address, we only need to enter in the numerical portion of the street address only. If the street address is 123 Cherry Lane, we would therefore enter in 123. And then the billing zip code. Now the CVV code, which is the 3-digit code that appears on the back of the card from MasterCard, Visa, Discover, or the 4-digit code that appears on the front of the card of American Express, that does not have anything to do with the discount rate. If you do not enter the CVV code, you can make your selection in the CV Presence drop-down menu. However, if you do enter in the CVV code, notice the CV Presence field then becomes disabled. The invoice number and product order number fields are there for you to use for your discretion. If your business or organization does not utilize that within your day-to-day tasks, you can absolutely disregard that. However, a great suggestion to use this space for, in the instance of a doctor's office, let's say the patient was a child and the parent is the one that's making the payment. You can always use this space to reference the child's name and then click process. And just like with the other transaction, the receipt page will appear and it will give us everything that we've entered in at the time of the transaction. So again, you see that you have the patient number or the client ID or customer number. You have the subtotal. We see that, again, for security purposes, Lucy will only provide the last 4 digits of the card number as well as gray out the expiration date. We see that we have the card type, the cardholder's name, and the invoice number, which actually references the patient's name or the child's name. We have the street address that was entered in at the time of the transaction. And as far as the entry method, we see that this was manual as opposed to swiped. And the result is declined. It even gives us a declined reason. So if we needed to actually see the transaction go through, we would go back and click here. And we're just going to enter in the card number once more. And now we see that the transaction was approved. Now, in addition to being able to print the receipt, you also have the option to email the receipt to the cardholder by simply entering the email address and clicking where it says email receipt. And then the next page that will appear will say thank you. A copy of your receipt has been sent to and the email address provided. Now that was a swiped and a manually entered transaction. The next thing I want to show you is processing a void and a refund. Now processing a void and a refund, for all intents and purposes, they're pretty much the same thing in the aspect that ultimately it's processing a credit to a transaction that's already occurred. The difference between the two is that a void is a credit back to a transaction that was processed on the same day. A refund is a credit of a transaction that's been processed on a different day. In order to process those transactions, we'll go to the Find Transactions folder. And just like within the Virtual Terminal folder, we want to make the selection based upon the transaction type. We'll click Credit. And the Find Credit Transaction page appears. Now the start and end date will always default to whatever the current date is. Since we're processing a void, there isn't anything to do other than click Submit. And here's a listing of all of the transactions that have been processed today. Now let's say we needed to void this $150 transaction for our customer ID 0507A. What we would do is click the reference number. Lucy will highlight the transaction confirming the selection, and then I'll scroll down to the bottom of the page. It gives us a copy of the receipt and the option to void this transaction. So I'll click the button that says yes, void this transaction, and Lucy will automatically give us a security pop-up question. Are you sure you want to void this transaction? If you click OK, this transaction will be voided and dropped from the system. And this is in an effort to limit the amount of errors that are made when processing transaction. So Lucy will always make sure if this is the action you wish to take prior to processing. So I'm sure, and I click OK. The next page that appears will be an approval page letting us know that the response is okay. If we want to see the transaction actually voided or the void removed, we'll go back to Credit in the Find Transactions folder. Again, the start and end date will default to the current date, and we click Submit, and we see that patient 0507A in the amount of $150 has been voided successfully. Now, processing a refund would be the exact same thing. The difference is that we would select a different day. So let's say the transaction happened on May the 1st. I'll update my start and end date calendar and then click Submit. And here's a list of some of the transactions that have been processed on that day. Now, let's say we needed to process a refund for John Smith for this $515 transaction. Just as with the void, we want to click the reference number, and Lucy will highlight the transaction confirming the selection. We scroll down to the bottom of the page, and again, we have a copy of the receipt and the option to refund. Now, processing a refund within the Lucy Virtual Terminal differs than that of processing one on a physical terminal. Again, a terminal that sits on the counter or desktop. Now, within a physical terminal, using the same scenario, if the original sale was processed to a Visa ending in 6781 and the cardholder wanted the refund to be applied to their American Express, they could do that. And the reason why is that a physical terminal views all transactions as individual transactions. It's not looking for an originating transaction to match the refund to. While this may be convenient for the cardholder, what this also means is that anyone that has a card can process a refund to their card to have funds added to their account. Without an originating sale, this is theft. And unfortunately, we've experienced some people have that experience, whether it be a new employee or a disgruntled employee or even cleaning persons that come in at the end of the night. We have to remember, the physical credit card terminals are never powered off, nor are they unplugged, and that's because the transactions have to settle and batch, and that communication has to be communicated over the course of the night. Now, within the Lucy Virtual Terminal, that could never happen. Again, using the same scenario, if the original sale was processed to a Visa ending in 6781, the refund would need to be applied back to the same card. You'll see here that it says back to account, and again it says 6781. In addition to that, the refund can only be either the full amount of the transaction or a partial amount. It could never be more than what the original transaction was for. So let's say we needed to refund $15 back to the card. We update the amount and click Yes Refund, and again, great security feature about Lucy, it will ensure if this is the action you wish to take. Yes, I'm sure. I click OK. And again, the next page that appears will be the approval page. If I want to see the refund process successfully, I'll click on Credit within the Find Transactions folder. Again, it defaults to the current date. I click Submit, and there we had the credit in the amount of $15. Now that's processing a void and a refund. Now, as far as batching and settling the terminal at the end of the day, Lucy is very intuitive in the instance that it will automatically settle and batch your terminal at the end of the night at 11:59 p.m. What that means for you is that there isn't anything for you to do to batch or settle your terminal. However, at the end of your business day, if you would like to see the sales that you've processed, you would actually come to this page. This is an itemized list of all of the transactions that have been processed in this particular day. So you'll see that you have not only the cardholder's name, but you also have the transaction amount, you have the customer ID, you even have the invoice number if, again, that's applicable to you, and you have the username, so you can tell who's processing what transaction when. That's something that you will not have with the physical terminal. Someone can swipe and swipe all day, however, you would never know who was actually processing the transactions. In addition to seeing this itemized list of the transactions that were processed, you're also able to view a summary of the transactions that have been processed as well. In order to view this, we would go to Summary within the Find Transactions folder. And just like when finding transactions, the date will always default to whatever the current date is. Since I want to see today's transactions, I'll just simply click Submit. And Lucy will provide a bird's eye view of everything that has been processed in every category. Now, not only will it provide you with the total amount in sales, it also breaks it up per card type, transaction amount, and it provides you with the return amount as well and the net amount less any refunds. And you can view this on a daily, weekly, I know especially billing and accounting departments like to see this on a monthly and quarterly basis. Whatever date range you desire, you're able to view it in that manner. So let's say we just finished the month of April and we wanted to see what our transactions were. I'll just update my start and end date calendar for that particular date range and click Submit. So again, this gives a more detailed version or a more robust version of what has been processed. So again, you'll see we'll have the total amount in sales, and it breaks it up per card type, all of the refunds that have been processed, and the net amount less any refunds. So that's utilizing the Find Transactions folder within Lucy. The next thing I would like to show you during this demo is the recurring billing feature. Now, recurring billing within its own right is a way to process an automatic payment. However, within Lucy, not only is it a way to process an automatic payment, but it's also a way to create a customer record in a safe and secure manner. In order to do so, we'll go to the recurring billing folder and click Add Customer. And the Add Customer page appears. Now for the customer ID, we suggest that it remain consistent to whatever record-keeping method you're utilizing. For the logistical information for the cardholder, again, you just need to enter in their first name, last name, email address, and the best contact number that you have for the cardholder. The billing address is irrelevant at this point because we will actually provide that when we add the payment info. I'll go ahead and click Add Customer, and then you see we have successfully created a customer record. The next thing would be to add the payment info, so I'll click where it says Add Credit Card or ACH. What type of payment would you like to add, credit card or ACH? And all ACH is just an automatic debit from the bank account on file. So I click credit card, and then the add payment page appears. I'm going to enter in the card number. And just like when we're processing a transaction, Lucy will validate the card type confirming this is a MasterCard. I'll enter in the expiration date, again the name as it appears on the card, the numerical portion of the street address, and the billing zip code. Would you like to charge this account right away or store it for later use only? Let's go ahead and save the payment info. And you can see we have successfully added the payment information. Now let's say the patient is ready to make their payment or their copay and they have an existing record with us. The way that we find them, we go to the recurring billing folder and click View Customer, and our Find Customer page will appear. Now we can search by any criteria. However, if we have their chart number in front of us, we can search by customer ID. Now notice I'm only going to enter in a portion of the search value and click Find Customers. Any record that has that information will appear. So here we are with the correct customer ID, so I'll select it, and then it brings us back to the customer record. So when it's time to accept the payment, I'll confirm with the cardholder, John, are you still using your MasterCard ending in 5454? John confirms, and notice the expiration date is listed here, and that's only to confirm and validate that the card has not expired. So John has given the OK. I enter in the transaction amount and click Charge. Again, are you sure you want to charge this account? I click OK. And it brings us right back to the credit card sales screen. Everything has already been pre-filled. There isn't anything to enter. We have the card number. And again, notice that for security purposes, it only provides the last 4 digits of the card number. We even have the billing address that's associated with the card. So even though this is a manually entered transaction, it will still be processed at that lower swiped rate. So we'll go ahead and click Process. And we see that the transaction is approved. Now again, when it's time to print the receipt, we'll just simply click where it says Print Receipt. And it will print to any network printer in the office. You want to be certain to print at least 2 copies. The first would be to obtain the cardholder's signature and retain for your records, and the second copy would be to give to the cardholder. So that's using the recurring billing as far as creating and using customer records. Now let's say the patient has had a procedure done, and the insurance company covered a portion of the procedure, but they have an outstanding balance. Rather than to have that amount go to collections or go unpaid, you can actually offer the cardholder a payment plan. In order to do so, we'll still go back to our View Customers in our recurring billing folder and search by customer ID again. And here's our record. Now, Lucy considers a payment plan to be a contract. So within our contract section, we'll click where it says Add Contract, and the Add Contract page appears. Now for the contract ID, again, we always suggest that it remain consistent with whatever the customer ID is. The contract name, however, can be more specific to what the payment plan is for. Now the start and end date should always be a date between the 1st and the 27th of the month, and that is to take into consideration the month of February. Now let's say this payment is going to take place on the 10th, and it will end on, let's say, August the 10th as well. Now, which account should be billed for this contract? We already have the card on file, so we'll make that selection and execute this contract. What is the payment frequency? Let's say it will be once per month. Now in the subtotal section, this will be the amount that is to be billed on whatever the payment frequency is. So this is the amount that will be billed on a monthly basis. Let's say it's $200. This next question, many people really appreciate the recurring billing feature within Lucy. If a transaction is ever declined on this contract, it can be reprocessed once per day. How many times, or in essence, how many days would you like to reprocess this contract if it declines? The maximum amount of time that you can select is 10 days. And the thought process behind that is that most people get paid on either a weekly or bi-weekly basis. So at any given point within a 10-day time period, there should be funds either on the credit card or within the bank account to cover the amount of the transaction. The next two questions, you would want to select yes. Would you like to receive a confirmation email when a transaction is approved or declined? Yes. And then, would you like transaction receipts to be emailed to the customer? You want to select all transactions. So now that we've added all of the information, we'll go ahead and click Add Contract. And now you see we have successfully created our contract. Our customer will be billed on May the 10th in the amount of $200. And remember, there isn't anything for us to do, because whether the transaction is approved or declined, we will receive an email notifying us of the status. Now let's say the cardholder comes back and says, well, $200 being taken out of my account at one time is a bit much. However, I do get paid on a weekly basis. Can we do $50 weekly as opposed to $200 monthly? The answer to that is yes. And we do not need to delete this contract and create a new one. We simply click the contract ID, make the necessary updates, so execute this contract once per week, and the amount to be billed on a weekly basis is $50. And then click Update Contract. And it's that easy. Now the next thing I would like to show you would be managing users. We strongly suggest anyone who currently has the access to process transactions should have their own login credentials within Lucy. The reason for that is, one, when you're processing transactions, you're able to see who processed the transactions by the username. And I'll show you here. So see, we have different usernames. So we could tell if Sarah processed a transaction, if Michael processed another transaction, and if Emery processed a transaction. In addition to that, there's different security and authority levels. And you wouldn't want everyone to be able to have the same access. So in order to add a user, we'll go to our Manage Users folder and click Add, and then the Add User page appears. For the username, we always recommend that it either have something to do with the name of the business or the employee's name themselves. Here's the security levels I was speaking to. 1 as the lowest and 4 being the highest as an administrator. And then you want to complete each field that has an asterisk next to it at the employee level. So once we've done entering all of the necessary information, we'll go ahead and click Save User. The next page that appears will actually provide the username and password. The password is a temporary password and is required to be changed upon initial login. And you can get this information over to the user by simply emailing the password. They will receive a detailed email providing the username and password, and it will be sent in a safe and secure manner. We'll go ahead and click Send, and we see that the email has been successfully sent. Lastly, I would like to show you the different security levels as far as the authority levels are concerned. So in order to do that, we'll go to the Preferences folder and click Security, and here are the security settings. First, let me start out with the second section that says Activate, Deactivate, Redeem, Refund, and Reload. That has to deal with gift cards. So if you are not accepting gift cards within your office or organization, you can completely disregard that section. Otherwise, the security settings and levels function as a tiered level program. So a level 1 is able to do a sale, a return, a void, and have access to reports. On a tiered level, 2s are able to do everything that a 1 can do, in addition to whatever a 2 is slated to do. So on top of sales, returns, voids, and reports, 2s can also do a pre-authorization, a force authorization, inquiries, and adjustments. The same thing with 3s. 3s are able to do everything that a 1 can do, a 2 can do, and then whatever a 3 is able to do. And lastly, 4s as administrators are able to do everything. Now let's say we didn't feel comfortable with a return being done at level 1 and you wanted to change it to a level 3. All you would simply have to do is select the return drop-down menu, make the change to level 3, and then click Change Security. And it's that simple. And within the Lucy security settings, you have the ability to being able to modify the security settings to accommodate your individual business needs. Thank you for viewing the Lucy demo. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact us at 866-725-8500 and listen to the prompts for the appropriate department. Thank you for viewing the Lucy demo, and have a great day.